Death has always been the greatest mystery. Every culture, every religion, every person who has ever lived has asked the same question. What happens when we die? For thousands of years, the answers came from philosophy, faith, or imagination. But now, for the first time, neuroscience is beginning to offer a theory, one grounded in observation, data, and the final moments of the human brain. When a person dies, we often think of it as a single event. The heart stops, the brain shuts down, and everything ends. But science has discovered that death is not an instant. It's a process. Inside the skull, in those final seconds, the brain doesn't fade to black. It erupts. Researchers studying patients during cardiac arrest have recorded something astonishing. Just after the heart stops beating, the brain's electrical activity spikes, a surge more intense than when a person is fully conscious. For a brief window of time, the dying brain comes alive. Neurons fire in synchrony, flooding with energy as if the mind is fighting against the dark. This surge, sometimes called the final brain wave, has been observed in humans and animals alike. In one study, scientists recorded waves of gamma activity, the same type associated with perception, memory, and awareness, moments after death. It suggests that for a few seconds, the brain might enter a hyperconscious state. Everything you've ever seen, felt, or remembered could flicker through your mind in a single burst of neural light. People who have experienced near-death states often describe something similar. Vivid memories, a sense of leaving the body, intense peace, or seeing light. For decades, these experiences were dismissed as hallucinations, but now neuroscience is starting to connect them to the dying brain's last surge of activity. When oxygen levels drop, the brain releases protective chemicals. Glutamate floods synapses. The visual cortex misfires, creating tunnels of light. The temporal lobe, responsible for emotion and memory, activates fragments of your life like a film reel. In that instant, the boundary between consciousness and nothingness blurs. But what does that mean? Does it prove that consciousness continues after death, or that the brain simply generates one last illusion as it shuts down? Neuroscientists are careful not to overreach. What they can say is this: the brain remains active longer than we thought. It doesn't simply switch off when the heart stops. It enters a transition, a liminal phase where the mind might still be experiencing something, even as the body is clinically dead. This finding has changed how doctors define death itself. In hospitals, when a person's heart stops, they're declared clinically dead, yet for several minutes their brain may still be processing signals. In rare cases, people revived after cardiac arrest have been able to describe details from the room, the sounds of machines, the conversations of doctors, even though their brains were supposedly inactive. Studies from the University of Southampton and NYU Langone Medical Center have reported patients recalling accurate information from periods when no measurable brain activity was present. If consciousness can linger after the heart stops, even for seconds, it raises profound questions. What is consciousness, really? Is it only a product of neurons, or something deeper that the brain channels like a signal? Some neuroscientists, such as Christoph Koch and Anil Seth, argue that consciousness arises entirely from the brain's network complexity. When that network collapses, awareness ceases. Others suggest that consciousness might be a fundamental property of the universe, not created by the brain, but filtered through it. In the last moments of life, the barrier between mind and matter may thin. The brain floods with endorphins, giving feelings of warmth and peace. Time perception breaks down. In these seconds, a person may feel outside of time entirely. To the observer, death appears instantaneous. To the mind inside, it might feel infinite. Even after the heart has stopped, cells in the brain continue to function for hours. In lab experiments, glial cells, the brain support network, have been seen activating after death, expanding like flowers in the dark. These post-mortem processes reveal that the brain doesn't simply die. It transforms. It follows its own timeline, winding down cell by cell, signal by signal. For neuroscientists, this raises another question. If activity persists, where does consciousness actually end? Is it the moment of cardiac arrest, the loss of measurable brain waves, or the cessation of molecular signaling? There's no clear answer yet. The more science looks, the blurrier the border becomes. Some researchers now believe that the brain may possess a built-in death protocol, a sequence of electrical and chemical events designed not to prolong suffering, but to preserve meaning in the final moment. When the body fails, the mind releases itself, entering a final, intense state of integration. Every memory, every emotion, every connection that made you who you are may converge in one brilliant flash. From the outside, it looks like silence. Inside, it might be the loudest moment of life. This concept doesn't prove an afterlife, but it changes what we think death is. It suggests that death is not an immediate cut, but a transformation, a passage where consciousness dissolves gradually rather than abruptly. The final moments may not be darkness, but light shaped by the brain's deepest architecture. For centuries, religion has described the soul leaving the body. Neuroscience doesn't confirm that, but it doesn't entirely deny it either. It shows that the mind, at death, undergoes something profound and mysterious, something that feels larger than biology alone. Some scientists have compared it to a dream state amplified 1,000 times, where the brain turns inward to face itself. Others see it as a final synthesis, the ultimate reflection of self before returning to nothing. One of the most compelling studies on this subject occurred in 2022, when doctors accidentally recorded the brain activity of an 87-year-old man as he died from cardiac arrest. In the moments following his last heartbeat, his brain produced rhythmic oscillations typically linked with dreaming and memory recall. For about 30 seconds after clinical death, his brain seemed to replay his life. It was the first direct evidence of what could be happening as consciousness fades. This discovery inspired new theories about what death might feel like. Some neuroscientists believe the brain uses its remaining energy to create a coherent final experience, a way to ease the transition between existence and oblivion. In that sense, the light at the end of the tunnel might not be an illusion, but the mind's natural way of guiding itself into rest. And yet, even with all this research, the ultimate question remains unanswered. Science can measure neurons, but not the essence of awareness. It can describe what happens to the brain, but not to the subjective experience inside it. Consciousness, the raw sense of being, remains the one phenomenon science can observe but cannot fully explain. Whether it ceases, transforms, or continues in another form is still beyond measurement. Perhaps the answer lies not in physics or faith alone, but in the bridge between them. The dying brain may be showing us that life and death aren't opposites, but stages of the same continuum. Consciousness could be like a wave, rising from the ocean, forming for a time, then returning to the sea. The pattern ends, but the energy remains. When neuroscientists look at the final moments of the brain, what they see is not emptiness but complexity, a symphony of activity winding down with purpose. The last spark of awareness may not be fear, but acceptance. In those seconds, the mind seems to dissolve into something larger than itself, whether that's chemistry or eternity. No one knows what happens after death, but science has shown that in our final moments, we are not gone immediately. Our brains light up with one last blaze of meaning, perhaps the universe's way of saying goodbye. And maybe that's what makes life itself so extraordinary. Every thought, every connection, every fleeting second of consciousness exists against the backdrop of that final mystery. We live knowing it will end, yet the mind refuses to let go without understanding. That's what drives science, art, and faith alike. The search for what happens when the light fades. The truth may never be complete, but what neuroscience offers is a glimpse. Death is not silence, but transformation. It is the mind's final act, the moment when awareness meets the unknown, and for a heartbeat longer than we ever imagined, continues to wonder.